Am I to believe that you in fact were present when the girl got killed?
Yes. I looked away just for like a split second and then heard like a loud thud on the car or whatever.
A popular high school girl from Nevada would get a text from her mom asking where she was. The mom would never get a response back. And just a couple of days later, a gruesome discovery was made. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Micaela Costanzo. Viewer discretion is advised. Micaela Costanzo, who would go by Mickey normally to her friends and family, was born on May 3rd, 1994 in Elko, Nevada. Nevada. Mickey was considered always the optimistic. She always looked on the positive side of things. She would turn the negative into something positive just to lift everyone's spirits. Her friends and her family would say that her sense of humor was something that was pretty much better than anyone else. She would always try to make someone laugh or at least smile, especially if they were having a bad day. She was really good about making sure someone's bad day was turned into, at least for a moment, a good one. It was just a natural born gift that she seemed to have. Micaela also excelled in school, always. She got very good grades. She was very active at school. She was a basketball player. She also ran track. At the time of this story, she was a 16-year-old junior at West Wendover High School. And this is located in West Wendover, Nevada. Despite her great grades and despite her playing basketball and running track, that still wasn't enough for her. So she also was an active member of the school's newspaper. She helped edit. Her family said she was just a super involved student, and that's just the type of person she was in all facets in life. They also said that Micaela really just touched the lives of many, many people, and that she was just such a loving, mature young lady. She was also very close with her mom and her sisters. Micaela and her sisters were always really, really good about keeping in touch with each other and with their mom, like through text and calling, like if they were going to be running late after school or they had some after school thing to go to. They were always in communication, always texting, just to make sure that mom and the other sisters always knew where each other was. Which is why her family would become very concerned when they weren't getting responses back from her on the afternoon of March 3rd, 2011. Micaela had planned to stay after school that day because she had some track things to do and she was going to help clean up some things, and then she was planning to go home after that. Normally, her older sister would pick her up from school and bring her home, but her older sister at this time was actually out of town on a little vacation. So Micaela had said to her mom and her sisters, hey, the plan for me today, I'm just going to walk home after I'm done with everything at school. It's like just a little under a mile away from where she lives. Throughout that day, she was texting her mom and her sisters about how the day was going and what the plans were for after school. It was just her routine, is what they always did. But when about 5 or 5:30 rolled along, Micaela still hadn't texted or called her mom. And this was a little odd because her mom knew exactly when track was over and when she was supposed to be on her way home from the school. Now, at this time, Micaela's mom is actually at work. She worked at a local casino, but she is still able to try to text her and get, she tried to call her, but she never answered. She never responded to the text messages. She knew exactly what time she should have been walking home, but got nothing from her. So she's growing very concerned. So mom starts texting and calling her, like I said, and gets nothing. Then she starts calling and texting her other sisters to see, like, hey, have you heard from Micaela? And they're all like, no, we haven't heard anything at all from her. At first, her sisters were like, well, maybe she's finally becoming a normal teenager and just ignoring her family for a friend or a boy. They then start to reach out to her friends and also Micaela's boyfriend, because she did have one at the time. And none of them had heard from her, and none of them had seen her since school. So now at this point, Micaela's like massive network of family and friends is texting and calling one another, other people they know. So you have like this huge kind of like search party going on through text, basically. But after they get nothing, later that night, they call police and they report her missing. And the police, they took it seriously immediately, and they began investigating this right away. They're actually able to pull her cell phone records just in terms of like who she had called or who had called her. And with her phone records, they found a number of phone calls from one phone number in particular in the time frame of like when school would let out and when track was supposed to be over with. So between like 3-ish and 5:30-ish, they had several phone calls. The calls and also several texts had come from another high schooler, an 18-year-old by the name of Cody Patton. Police ask the family, is Cody her boyfriend? And they're like, oh, no. They've been friends since they were like very young children. They grew up with each other. Cody has a fiance, and Micaela's dating another boy. So no, they're just really good friends. Cody is a senior at the same high school. He's on the high school football team. He's super popular. Everyone knows him. He's like this kind of goofy, silly type guy. He is known to be very sweet and endearing to a lot of people. But then there's also a lot of people who say that Cody has a pretty bad temper at times, and he can get aggravated really quickly. So there was kind of like the two sides of Cody Patton. But police wanted to know, why was he in constant communication with Micaela that afternoon? So they have to bring him in for, just for some questions to ask him what he may know. He said they were just talking through the phone just about like some plans that they were going to have later on. It wasn't anything, important, and she didn't say anything concerning, and he had no idea where she was. Now, Cody says he did see Micaela sometime, probably, he said around 5-ish, maybe a little before. He saw her leaving the front door of the school, and he noticed that she was with a guy that he just assumed was her boyfriend, because he was a little shorter, and her boyfriend was shorter than her. And that's the last time he saw her, that she walked out of the door and walked out towards the parking lot. Meanwhile, the entire community is searching high and low for her. There's volunteers, there's police, there's everyone looking for this young girl. And in the Wendover area is pretty close to desert and a lot of open, just empty, freezing cold desert. So they comb through as much of the desert as they can searching for her. Her older sister just sort of got in the car and just began driving around in the dark, just like determined to be the one to find Micaela and bring her home. She did not, unfortunately, she didn't feel like there would be a positive outcome, just because in situations like this, it's not usually always ending in a positive note. Obviously, she hoped she would still be alive, but they would get their answers, though, about 2 days or so after she disappeared. A man was walking around the nearby desert area, and in a particular area they refer to as the gravel pits, when he noticed some tire tracks and then some like dirt and like some shrubbery that appeared to be kind of like disturbed. And when he got closer, he noticed what he thought was blood. So he just took a step back and he called police. And that is when the search was officially called off. When police and forensics arrived to that scene, they were able to find human remains inside a very shallow grave. And those remains would be identified as those of Micaela Costanzo. She had been stabbed. She had been like sliced with a knife. She had some pretty severe blunt force trauma to her head, as if she had been struck several times by something. The investigators would say that these particular wounds, they looked very savage. They looked very very uncontrolled, as if someone did these types of things out of anger and aggression. That this was not some calm, calculated murder. This was done out of a crime of passion. They believe that ultimately the fatal wound was her throat had been cut. And immediately they were like, who on earth could have done this? Who would have done this? Micaela had no enemies. She usually was one to keep way away from drama and keep out of any of gossip going around school. She just had nothing but her friends, and that was about it. She was just one of the friendliest and sweetest girls any person would ever meet. And people just did not understand how anyone could have been so mad at her to do something like this to her. Unfortunately, the crime scene, there was no, obviously there's no fingerprints, there's no DNA left behind that doesn't belong to Micaela. They found no hair samples, there's no shoe impressions. The tire tracks, they looked pretty common. There was just nothing left behind. At that point, they wanted to see if they could then trace her steps at school using the CCTV camera system they have there, and they were able to find Micaela on it. They find Micaela was walking the halls, all between the hours of 3 and 5:30. She was sort of off doing different things. They then see her approach not the front of the building, but they see her leave out the south end, the rear end of the school. But she isn't with anyone. She's not with her boyfriend. She's not with any friends. She is walking by herself the entire time. In fact, the CCTV footage only shows one other person walking around towards, the 5 p.m. area when Micaela was last seen leaving. That person was 18-year-old Cody Patton. You actually can see him walking towards the same direction that Micaela had just walked. So he had told police that he had seen her leave the building on the front of the building with her boyfriend or someone who may have looked like her boyfriend. But that was completely false. And he also said that, he didn't go after her or follow her or anything outside the building. And they can see that he was walking towards her. Was he following her? Was this just a coincidence? Did he actually even see her? Police don't really know. But they do know that he did lie. Police did learn, he is someone with a hot temper. He is someone who is overly confident. He can be very cocky at times. He can over-embellish things to make himself look better. So, but is he someone capable of this type of brutal murder? Most people would say no. So police bring him back in for more questioning. So he's basically denying any involvement, nothing to do with it. He didn't lie. Sorry, not him. Well, police then decide to take a break from questioning him because his dad, Cody's dad, wanted to come in the room to talk to him. And so they allow that to happen. And while the officers are outside of the office, they can't really hear what's being said, but they do hear a lot of loud voices and screaming, crying. A lot of emotions are going on in that room. Luckily, they actually left their tape recorder in there and turned on. So they actually would find out later what was being said between the two of them, the father and son. And here is a snippet of that audio.
You gotta start fixing this now. As much as you can. What you did is heinous, Cody. I don't want to abandon you at all. Okay? We gotta do what's right for Micaela as well.
Cody had just told his father what he had done. He told his dad what happened that afternoon when Micaela went missing. He told his dad that he picked up Micaela from school after her track meet They were then going to drive towards the gravel pits to, I guess, hang out or talk. I'm not really sure. But he says on that drive, Micaela had said to him, hey, I'm going to break up with my boyfriend. You should break up with your fiance, and the two of us can start dating. So after the whole thing with him telling his dad, police come back into the room. They do basically get Cody to say what happened, or according to him. And here's a snippet of what he said happened kind of after Micaela had mentioned, oh, let's date each other and break up with our significant others.
Started yelling at me, and I said it's because I'm not leaving Tony high. She started like pounding on my chest and stuff. She fell down and hit her head, and she just laid there and was looking at the sky, and like her eyes started to turn black, and I didn't know what to do. I just sat there, and she started to like shake and seize. I kind of just tried to hit her on her head right here somewhere, trying to just knock her out, and it hit like right here, and it tore it up pretty bad, and then she stopped. I didn't know what to do. I was gonna call my dad, but I knew he would freak out. So I put her in the little grave thing I dug by the big bush. I covered her up, and I took the clothes over in the gravel pit area and burned them.
So he says they got out of the car. When they got to the gravel pits, they started to argue. They fought. One thing led to another, and somehow Micaela fell backwards and she smashed her head on a rock. She began to like twitch and seize. He says he didn't know what to do, and so he got a shovel out of his car, because every 18-year-old guy typically has a shovel in their car. He then whacked her over the head to get her to stop like moving and twitching. Instead of calling for help, he hits her with a shovel. And then to stop her from making like noises out of her mouth, he then cuts her throat. But then he doesn't explain why the other stab wounds were there. So Cody was promptly arrested and charged with the murder. All while claiming this was a total accident. He didn't mean to do it. None of this was my fault. It just happened. He says he just made stupid decisions after she accidentally hit her head. But this was not the end. There were some, including Micaela's family, who were very shocked to hear that Cody had apparently contributed to her death. Some people were convinced that Cody was lying, but he was probably forced to kill Micaela by someone else, because that's the only way someone like Cody would ever do anything like that. He wouldn't just do this on his own. Their suspicions would end up having some validity. Micaela's family and friends doubted that she would ever confront Cody in that way, saying, hey, let's leave our significant others and start dating each other. There was no indication that she really even liked him. But she also really loved her boyfriend, and Cody was engaged to a woman that he also loved very much. Like I said, Micaela hated drama. She hated all of it, anything to do with it. She would always distance herself from it, and she would always make sure she was never the cause of drama and that she was never involved in it. She even, out of respect for Cody's fiance, started to stop hanging out with Cody because she didn't want Cody's fiance to get the wrong idea. Cody's fiance, by the way, is 18-year-old Tony Fratto. She didn't want Tony getting the wrong idea, thinking there was anything going on between the two of them, so that's why she just, kept her distance. So many people, including some members of Micaela's family, just felt that Cody's confession just simply wasn't adding up. Some of it just didn't make any sense. Like, why would he hit her over the head with the shovel if she accidentally fell and hit her head? Why aren't you calling police immediately? And therefore, they weren't believing the accidental death thing. And the knife wounds, the stab wounds, that doesn't add up. And the coroner determined that these were very strong, very forceful stab wounds. This was done by someone with anger and rage. The shovel was smashed over her head with enough force to like fracture her skull. Cody's defense attorney would question Tony, the fiance, and he said when he talked to her, Tony's whole demeanor was very deadpan, was very just cold. No emotion really was shown by her. He just felt something was off with Tony. And a couple of days later, he would be approached by Tony again, and she said, "I want to tell you the truth. I want to tell you what happened that afternoon." What? What? You're involved? Okay, this is the first we thought about that. Turns out Cody's confession was not the true story. So, with Tony's permission, Cody's attorney, who she is talking to, records this conversation that she has with the attorney, and it basically serves as a confession. And here are parts of that confession.
Am I to believe that you, in fact, were present when the girl got killed?
Yes, I looked away just for like a split second and then heard like a loud thud on the car or whatever. Micaela was on the ground and she wasn't really moving at that point. We had moved her to the grave and then we were kind of standing there deciding what do we do. We remember like holding down her legs and we had slit her throat.
Who cut her throat?
It was both of us.
So she says that on that afternoon, she got a text message from Cody that says, "I have her." Cody had picked up Micaela, and that's the her he was talking about. Then he went to where Tony lived and picked her up. Then the three of them drove out to the desert, to the gravel pits area. While Tony stayed in the car, she said Micaela and Cody got out of the car, and for some reason they were arguing. She saw that Micaela had pushed Cody into the car, and then next thing Tony knows is she hears like a loud thud. When Tony looks out the car, she sees Micaela on the ground, not moving. Tony says then Cody dug a small grave. They placed Micaela in it. Tony sat on Micaela's legs to prevent her from struggling, and the two of them would attack Micaela. For what reason? Who knows? I think Tony was trying to suggest this was some sort of self-defense because allegedly Micaela had shoved Cody into the car with some force that apparently, I guess, he responded to and did something bad. And then they hit her over the head with a shovel, and then they both stab her for some reason. It's never really explained why the knife was involved in this scenario. And then they both took turns to cut her throat, and that's how she died. So Cody's attorney, who is not representing Tony, gave this confession to police. Police listened to it. They said, okay. They then arrested Tony and also charged her with the murder. Tony was a devout Mormon. She was a former pageant queen. Everyone saw her as like this totally sweet, very charming woman who wouldn't hurt a fly. Apparently, she did have a pretty severe jealous side, and her jealousy would sometimes get the better of her, and she would lash out in negative ways. But I guess now the story at this point is making a little bit more sense, kind of. But the whole escalation with the knife and all that still is like, why? So then whose idea was this? Cody's? Tony's? Was it planned? Or was this a spur of the moment, oopsie daisies kind of thing? You have Cody saying this was all an accident, didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have Tony then saying, well, it was sort of like a self-defense thing, and we both killed her for whatever reasons we don't know. Apparently, Cody was a very, very possessive young man. He was very much in control of, let's say, Tony or any woman in his life. There were also allegations that Cody abused Tony. And there was some kind of validity to that because there was captured on CCTV from the school. This was a while before any of this. You could see Cody having a big argument with Tony, like pressed against the locker. He's waving his arms around, screaming at her. She looks very timid. And then at one point, he puts his hand around her neck. And then he just sort of flips out and runs away. Tony never presses charges. She never, they don't really do anything about it at the school. And the main reason why is because if he had gotten in trouble for this, then he would not have been able to get into the Marines, and that's something he really wanted to do. But it's also something that Tony knew could get him out of her hair, for God knows how long. So then did Cody force Tony to be involved in this whole thing? Because maybe he planned it, and he wanted her to participate in some weird, creepy, natural-born killers kind of thing? But then why in his confession would he protect her? If he's like this abusive guy who forced her to be involved in this murder, why protect her and leave her out of it completely in his confession? He's already going down for murder. Why not drag someone down with him if they were involved? Basically, people in the community have no idea what to believe. Police are like, we have two people who were involved in this murder. The reasons, the whys, the hows, the whats, it's confusing. And a lot of people were kind of feeling a little iffy about Tony's credibility here. And that would only get worse with a third story. So prosecutors agreed to let Cody take a plea deal. Basically, he would get first-degree murder, life in prison with the possibility of parole, and he wouldn't get the death penalty, but he would have to testify against Tony. He takes the deal for a minute, and then the next day he's like, never mind, I don't want to do this deal, I'll take my chances at trial. Okay. So then the prosecution's like, okay. They go to Tony. They now offer her a plea deal. They said, we'll give you second-degree murder, with the possibility of getting life in prison, but paroled after possibly 18 years. But you do have to testify against Cody. And she's like, yep, do it, I'll do it, sure. And this is when she offers a new story. She says that Cody was really pissed off at Micaela for some reason, to a point where he actually hated her. He hated seeing her, he hated being around her, everything to do with her. So he texts Tony and says, I have her, that part stays true. And then he picked up Tony, and when Tony got in the car, she said she saw Micaela in the back seat with her hands over her face, and she looked really scared, really nervous. So then Cody takes out his phone, and he texts Tony, who's right next to her, because he doesn't want Micaela to hear what he's about to say. He texts her, we have to kill her. They then get to the gravel pits, where Cody then forces Tony to, first of all, stand guard, while he does whatever he needs to do first. And then he tries to force her to hit Micaela over the head with a shovel. And then he forces her to stab her and cut her throat. Tony's like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, can we please not do this, let's let her go. According to her, she said she did hold Micaela's legs down for Cody. She also says that she agreed to hit her with a shovel, but she only struck her on the shoulder softly, and then Cody is the one who bashed her over the head with the shovel, and that Cody was the one to do all the stabbing and the throat cutting. So basically in this story, Tony is now saying she is also a victim in this. But then why would you admit to saying you did cut her throat, you did stab her in the previous confession? What was the point of that if it wasn't true? Because her confession didn't do anything for Cody. It just made him more of a murderer. Where the second confession, and all it did was added her to the mix. So what was the point of that if you're now going to say, well, I was a victim in this and I was forced to do all this stuff? I don't get it. It's very flip-floppy, and I don't understand the motives behind switching the stories around. But at any rate, prosecutors would allow her to take the plea deal, because the plan was for her to testify against Cody. And so she was sentenced to 18 years to life. So that means she can get paroled after 18 years. Does not mean she will be, but she could be. She could also be in prison for the remainder of her natural life. When this happens, Cody tells a fourth story. He's now saying this was all Tony's idea, the whole thing. I had nothing to do with it. I didn't kill her. I didn't do any of the murdering part or anything. She did all of it. He said that Tony had confronted Micaela at school that very day and called her a slut and said, I want to fight you. And apparently Micaela said, all right, let's fight, which is way out of her character. And that's how the whole turn of events started. That's then Tony came up with this master plan to drive her out to the desert and have her killed. But then why would Cody go along with it and not stop it? It's... what? So in 2012... he would then be allowed to take a plea deal. This time, he would take life in prison without the possibility of parole. The deal was he wouldn't get the death sentence. And so he signed the dotted line, and that's where he is now. This is like a wild back and forth where it's a convoluted mess. Personally, I feel like they're both lying. They're both also embellishing what happened. I think all of their stories are mixed with lies and the truth, and somewhere in there you have like pieces of the puzzle from each story told that actually equals out the whole picture. But who knows? And ultimately it doesn't matter. It's in the end, it's pretty obvious that they were both involved in her murder in some way, shape, or form. They both were participants. None of them called police. They both hid evidence and all that. So they're both extremely responsible for this. So they are both exactly where they should be right now, in my opinion. But that is it for this case today, folks. I hope you found it interesting. Yeah. Per the usual, if you want to see more cases told by me, I have a lot more here on YouTube now, but also over on my TikTok page, which is also called Making a True Crimerer. I have thousands of short form cases over there. Go ahead and give me a follow if you like, and you can watch all of those stories. Secondly, if you have a case you would like me to cover, please email me at mikey@truecrimerer.com. It's listed below. Go to my link tree below and scroll through my Crimerer case list to make sure the case you want me to cover isn't already on the list. You can search or scroll. There's a lot of names, I know. But if you don't see the name, email me just the name, when it happened, where it happened. If you do see the name, please do not email it to me again. It's already on there. It does not make me do the case any faster because I pick the cases I cover at random. They will all be covered at some point. I just don't know when. Lastly, if you want to support me in any way, we do sell merch. The link is in the link tree below. We sell t-shirts and hoodies. We sell a wine glass and other little things. We do ship internationally. Adam, he makes my merch himself. He does all the shipping and the handling. But yeah, he'll ship to you anywhere in the world. So that's that. Now it's time to say goodbye with Mr. Riley, who likes to give kisses. Want to say bye? Okay, that's just rude.
You're all a bunch of bitches and I hate you. You all suck. This crime page is stupid. You're all...
Molly, for God's sake, how dare you say that to all of the people that adore you? You're super adorable, and then you turn into a monster. Are you ashamed of yourself? She don't give a shit. She's cold-blooded. She's cold as ice. All right, Molly, say bye. Bye.